All right, let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to today's moderator, Mike Grandinetti, Chief Marketing and Corporate Strategy Officer of Reduxio. Mike, I would now like to turn things over to you.
Great. Andy, thank you, and hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time today to join us. We're excited to be working with the global VMUG community to host another educational webinar. And what we're looking to do today is we're looking to do something perhaps a little bit unique. We're here to do everything in our power to share best practices and to help educate you on what is happening in the world around us with regard to both cloud adoption as well as how we mitigate risks for infrastructure and operations managers who are moving to the cloud. And so the way that we'll manage the agenda today, I'll take a few minutes to set the context, and I'll draw on some research from the global strategy firm McKinsey and the well-known IT industry analyst firm Gartner to talk about what is happening in the world of cloud adoption today. It's then my pleasure to turn over the discussion to John Bambenek, and I'm going to introduce all of our speakers in detail in a moment. But suffice to say for now that John is a world-class cybersecurity expert, the perfect person to join us this morning to talk about how to mitigate risks when you move workloads to the cloud. We'll then have one of Reduxio's featured user customers. The company is known as LineMaster Switch, one of the world's leading makers of switch equipment. And Dale Warren, who's a system analyst at LineMaster, will join us to talk about the LineMaster environment as well as what they're doing to do world-class data protection. Our final speaker will be Cedric Higgins. Cedric is with the global IT services firm Fivesky. Cedric has spent over 20 years in the IT industry, managing internal infrastructure and operations, and he has particular expertise in cybersecurity and helping his clients understand how to mitigate data threats. And then we want to leave open time for Q&A. So our goal here is to be done within 55 minutes to give you plenty of time to get back to your day job. Okay, so let me just talk quickly about who our subject matter experts are and who will help us deliver the educational content today. So we'll lead off after my opening introductory talk with John Bambenek. John has a couple of very important and relevant roles. He's the manager of threat systems at Fidelis Cybersecurity, but he is also a very well-known incident handler at the Internet Storm Center. The Internet Storm Center is an organization that is keeping a very vigilant eye on what kind of data threats are happening on a daily basis, and they're sharing that with the global community. So John's been engaged in cybersecurity for over 15 years. He's a published author. He's published books, chapters of books, and articles. He's contributed to the creation of IT security courses. He's actually been responsible for certifying some of those courses, and he's been involved in many incident investigations, including with the FBI and Interpol. Okay? He's a well-regarded and highly in-demand conference speaker, and he runs a number of private intelligence groups that focus on the takedown of criminal entities. So we're honored to have him back again for a second time. Secondly, we've got Dale Warren. Dale is the systems analyst at LineMaster Switch Corporation. They're based in Connecticut. Dale's been there. He's primarily focused on managing their IT infrastructure. He's got very significant experience in managing multiple IT environments, including virtualized environments. And so we're very lucky and looking forward to having a chat with Dale and getting some very much on-the-ground insight into how he's dealing with these daily threats. And then last but not least, Cedric Higgins, who is a cybersecurity specialist with Fivesky Networks. He's also a 20-year veteran of the IT industry. He's very, very engaged in cloud services and helping customers engage in best practices while enjoying the benefits of the cloud, but while at the same time mitigating the risks of the cloud. Okay, so let me start off by just taking a few moments to set the tone for today's discussion. And what I want to do is I want to reference two world-class firms. The first one, McKinsey, the world's premier corporate strategy firm, and I want to draw on a recent business technology study that's been published over the last few months. One of the things that we're seeing today across all of business, whether it be digital transformation or cloud adoption, is there's a dramatically increasing separation between early adopters who are embracing best practices and those who are lagging behind the industry. So one of the key findings from the McKinsey survey of business technology leaders is that those organizations that have been fearless, that have recognized the great benefits of the cloud, have already moved more than 50% of their processing workloads to the cloud. Okay? So they are very far ahead of the pack. The laggards who have been fearful have moved less than 5% of their workloads to the cloud. So if we look in the lower right at the Pareto charts, what you'll see is some pretty compelling statistical evidence that talks about the benefits of moving to the cloud. So in terms of the first chart on the left, the time to market of provisioning of x86 server images in the cloud, companies that are working in the area of the private cloud that are just average take 180 minutes to provision a server. Companies in the top quartile are achieving benefits that are 1/3 of that time. It's taking them roughly 60 minutes or an hour to provision an x80 server image. Those in the public cloud, they're doing it decidedly faster, both the average about 60 minutes, but those in the top quartile are actually able to provision an x86 server in 30 minutes or less. So dramatic time savings and productivity boost for those people in best practices. Now, in terms of reducing costs, again, people on average in the private cloud today are reducing their costs by 10 to 20%, but the top quartile are actually seeing a 3 to 4x improvement in cost reduction, up to 30 to 40% reduction in cost by moving processing workloads to the cloud. And once again, we're seeing even more dramatic economic benefits with those people in the public cloud. While on average we're seeing 20 to 30% gains, we're seeing some staggering reductions in cost, up to 50% for the top quartile. So this is not just about technology, right? Increasingly, I know that as we work in agile environments, there's as much focus on process, strategy, change management, and putting in place the right organizational policies for those organizations that are best practices, that are moving more and more of their workloads to the cloud, and that are in the top quartile in terms of getting the benefits of improved time to market and reduced cost. Okay. Now I want to reference a document from the Gartner Group, whom I'm sure many of you know, the premier IT analyst organization from around the world. And this is specifically targeting people like Dale, infrastructure and operations managers who own the data center. Okay? There's no question, I don't have to tell any of you on this webinar this morning, that we are living in a data deluge. And with this massive amount of data that continues to increase, we're seeing rapid increases in storage backup costs, we're seeing higher backup failure rates, and we're seeing longer and more troubling backup window times. And so what Gartner is recommending to its client base and to the IT community at large is that we now are at a point where the cloud provides enough benefit that it is time to rethink data backup and protection, right, so that you can improve the cost savings, and we saw that very emphatically with the McKinsey data, and you can improve backup infrastructure resource utilization, okay? And of course, what happens is when we back up to the cloud, we alleviate the burden on data center backup infrastructure for more strategic needs. So what we're seeing, and again, this is also consistent with the McKinsey data, approximately 15% of organizations that Gartner has surveyed are already deploying the cloud for data backup. They're seeing a dramatic step function. They expect, based on survey results, to see over 40% of incremental organizations deploying cloud backup in some way over the next 6 months. And Gartner being Gartner, of course, they're going to take a very systematic approach. So the recommendation is to move remote office and back office data coming off desktops and laptops, departmental and small and mid-sized workloads to the cloud as soon as possible, right? And to adopt a tiered backup and recovery approach, backing up the lowest tier less frequently, and performing fewer full backups for static data. And of course, and this is where we now segue into John Bambenek, there's no question with this move to the cloud, we need to mitigate risk, we need to improve data availability. People are increasingly using cloud services as an additional data recovery solution. So let's now move forward. And John, let me ask you to share your considerable insights with our audience today about what's happening in terms of the cybersecurity threats.
Sure, and I want to say thanks for having me again. And I said hope to share some information. And kind of the question is, why are we still here? People talk, when are we going to solve security? When are we going to start solving some of those problems? Gartner says we're going to spend $90 billion in cybersecurity in 2017. But if you look in the past 5 years, right, I think people would say cybersecurity issues have gotten worse, not better, despite kind of the increasing prominence of the problem, increasing spending, and people are throwing a lot of resources at it. And certainly this year, there have been a couple of cases previously, but we're seeing attacks that are not just saying, I'm going to steal information. I'm going to compromise a handful of critical pieces of your infrastructure, but truly what I call organization debilitating attacks. We saw WannaCry and certainly a lot of the problems it had with the National Health Service in the UK, NotPetya, which Maersk recently reported that cost them $300 million, right? One malware outbreak based out of Ukraine of a Trojan horse cost just one company $300 million, and that's what they reported on to the SEC. So, I mean, the big impacts that really debilitate an organization's ability to do that. And part of the problem goes into, we create specific detections for specific tools. We focus on, I'm going to solve WannaCry, and as somebody has to investigate and respond to this stuff, the question I get is, what are you doing to protect me against this very specific named threat? Not what are you doing to protect me against, ransomware? How do we stop tomorrow's attack, right? Why does it keep happening? Cybercrime pays. For every criminal we put in prison, right? And I help law enforcement do that. It takes about 2 years to go after a guy or a small network of people, and there are thousands others that do it unabated. So the deterrence effect of criminal prosecution, right, just doesn't simply exist. And yet we still make the same mistakes. The Mirai botnet, default username and passwords. Some cloud services, people are adopting, putting some of these new DevOps services in the cloud, Mongo and Hadoop, putting it in their public AWS instance or Google Computer, whatever, with no authentication, and then they're being held for ransom, right? And certainly we see the recent events with Equifax, that the repository of our private financial data has been compromised. To what extent, we'll know here in the coming days, but that's a very big breach. But we protect systems, right? The adversary is attacking data or business processes, or the ability for an organization to occur, right? Because there are no consequences, it still happens. Because we protect against the last attack, they still keep winning. But at its core, right, the longer that I keep doing security, right, and I've spent my entire career doing it, we think of it as a technical problem, right? The technology is a tool. It is a means by which a math problem plays out, right? Criminals can get a whole lot of money, and there's very little cost that's imposed upon them as a result, because the cost of, among other things, of recovery is so high for ransomware. If you're going to lose $1 million a day, your organization, right? Are you going to pay a $500,000 ransom to get up today, or are you going to, try to recover while eating that loss? The math doesn't favor you unless we do something different, right? It's ultimately a math problem, and we need to focus our technology to basically solve that math problem. I sound kind of, cynical, right? Is it all really that bad? But the reality is ransomware, more than any other threat that I've heard in my career, right? We've been doing credit card fraud and big breaches and denial of service for a long time. But I'm hearing from organizations, people who have never really talked about security in a meaningful way except saying, hey, look at this in the news. They're really concerned about ransomware and their ability to maintain control of their data. And we're starting to have some really good endpoint options to prevent it. Now, granted, that's prevention. There's another side of it, right? You prevent something, you make it less likely, right? Less annualized loss expectancy, but we can also reduce the impact by solving how difficult it is to recover. So certainly with WannaCry and NotPetya, a lot of people are looking at big dollar amounts. And human nature being such that it is, I can do consumer ransomware and get $300 to $1,000 a victim. I mean, that's real money, let's not lie. But I can do ransomware on a hospital, and now we're talking a seven-figure payday, right? And people are being attracted to that. And certainly, your organization, right? There's business there. If I can disrupt your critical business operations, right? There's probably real money in there, right? WannaCry exposed a lot of equipment running embedded operating systems that have the same vulnerabilities as normal computers and still can be knocked offline. We don't think of ransomware, a big ransomware risk for an MRI machine, but if it's running Windows XP with SMB v1, the machine is now debilitated. It cannot provide the availability of doing MRIs. That's a big thing. NotPetya was because of a trusted third party, right? If you operated in the country of Ukraine, you had a business unit there, you had to use this accounting software. Hackers got into that, put in a Trojan in there that basically knocked down every organization that installed this. You had to install this software, right? But there was no way to prevent against it. You had to run it. There was no antivirus detection because the criminals ran their tools against antivirus to know it would be clean. The only option you had there is to deal with recovery, right? So I said, you can infect one machine, you can get hundreds, low thousands. You knock out an entire organization, and that's millions. That's real money out there, and we're going to be looking forward to more of this. So certainly when you're talking about cloud adoption, the thing that really comes into mind, right, the one story that captures my attention, there's an organization called CodeSpaces, roughly akin to GitHub. The entire purpose of this organization is to store people's source code. Hackers got in, got access to their cloud services, said, give us $250,000 or we're going to delete all your storage buckets. They did not pay. Storage buckets were deleted, and organizations ceased to exist because their core asset was gone, right? So certainly, these are the kind of things that concern me. We're starting to see some good solutions to deal with some of those risks in the cloud of somebody getting into that account and just deleting resources. So certainly, one of the things that, as you look to go into the cloud or public cloud is making sure that you really have that separation of duties, that people can't just simply destroy stuff. But there is hope, right? We've got a couple of solutions to that. Reduce the likelihood of attacks because we're starting to get good tools, but also reduce the damage a successful attack causes. So if I'm not eating $1 million of business impact, I'm eating only $10,000 of business impact, right? That's a net gain. And we can certainly deal with that. And I mentioned this last thing. We're talking a lot about geopolitical attacks. WannaCry was tentative with a moderate to low confidence to North Korea, NotPetya to Russia. Eventually, right, there's going to be a diplomatic solution to those kind of attacks. In the meantime, we've just got to solve the problem, make these attacks less impactful. So go ahead and pass it back. I think Mike had some questions and more deep dive that he wanted to do on a couple things.
That's great, John. Thank you so much. So, John, about 11 months ago, we did a similar webinar with VMUG on the same topic, and it seemed at the time things couldn't get much worse, and of course they did. And not only, and again, as you described, right, the organizational debilitation now is something that we just hadn't seen before on any scale, but it seems to be happening more regularly. The NSA tools and CIA tools that got hacked and were put into the hands of pretty much anybody that can write code, and now we've got teenagers that are using ransomware attacks as a way to buy beer and pizza money versus flipping burgers at McDonald's or mowing their neighbor's lawn. So given what's happened over the last year, how does your mental model change with regard to how companies need to think about protecting themselves? Is there anything specific in terms of advice that you would give to our listeners today?
I think a lot of that kind of comes back to making sure we do the essentials, things that we often forget about, right? 2 years ago, if somebody would have came to me and said, hey, are network worms a thing to worry about anymore? No, I mean, it was kind of a trivia item that you give to entry-level computer science students of the difference between a worm and a virus. Yet with the SMB v1 thing, they were able to weaponize a network worm. We have defenses against that. In fact, we had patches for that. If you patched, you were not impacted, and we never really found where the infection started, so it wasn't like somebody clicked on an email. It's, people had SMB v1 listening on the internet. The predictable things happen. We need to, modernize it, right? But the things we were talking about, these are the best practices to harden a system in the 90s. Excuse me, are just as true today. Patch and harden machines, keep open services off the open internet. Defense in depth. Segregated networks, not having a flat network. All things that we've known for a while. We've just forgotten why they mattered.
Okay, and John, so it's not just Maersk or Equifax or FedEx or Honda or the NIH, but small and mid-sized organizations. So we're dialed in here from San Francisco. The local public television station KQED was hit by an attack on the 13th of June, and they've been off the internet since. We're about to hear from Dale from Linemaster. Is there anything that small to mid-sized organizations that don't have nearly the cybersecurity budget or resources can do to try to stay out of the headlines themselves? Anything specific for smaller organizations?
Kind of beyond those essentials, right? Always updating stuff, put everything behind an access point or a router so people can't reach into your corporate network. Be careful about phishing, right? There's a lot of essentials out there. As much as you can for a small or medium business, outsource things that really aren't part of your core business that might introduce risks. If you're processing credit cards, right? Get a merchant account where that takes place all entirely on somebody else's network, because now you don't have to spend the resources to secure that and take time thinking, right? Do I absolutely need this data, this process, this resource? Is it critical to me? Can I outsource it? Is this something, this class of data I can delete and just not have to worry about the risks to, like I said, stay out of the headlines? Okay.
John, recently we've been reading more about fake malware attacks. Fake malware attacks are obviously different from, a lot of the threats we talked about. Can you comment just quickly on how people might deal with fake malware attacks, if they even can?
Yeah, there's some variants of ransomware that basically is just extortion. We've infected your network. It replaces your screensaver or whatever. Or you might get a threatening email saying, we're going to give you a denial of service attack if you don't pay us 10 Bitcoin. Many of these, like the denial of service extortion kind of stuff, never pan out. So, I guess the akin is ask for proof of life if you're really concerned, which is kind of a normal hostage negotiation tactic, right? Show me you actually have something beforehand, because anybody who's in it, right, knows it, right? So, and the smaller the dollar amount, the less likely it's just some kid trying to get a whole lot of beer and pizza money.
Yeah, okay. Now, I know that as I introduced you, we talked about the fact that you've created courses, you've certified courses, right? There's been a lot of reports that state that there are over 200,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs in the U.S. today, and we're seeing a lot of institutes of higher education, of course, responding to market demand and creating degree programs and certificate programs. We had a very interesting chat before today's call about your perspective on how successful you think this might be. So can you kind of share some of your thoughts about what's actually happening in the world of education to prepare people to continue to fight these battles and the quality of these programs?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of effort, and right, there is unfilled jobs, and I, how you count and measure it, I don't know. I know I compete against a lot of people to fill open positions I have, and people get poached out of my company. I poach people out of other companies, and we're all hiring. So, I mean, it is effective a negative unemployment market. But, as both a hiring manager and somebody who teaches in higher ed, it's very hard, considering our higher educational model, to put in good cybersecurity courses. I mean, we could talk about essentials and very kind of introductory stuff, but a course I inherited at my university was digital forensics. It's very hard to teach that course with credibility for somebody who's never actually done it. Or done it in the real world. So you can talk about high-level things of, hey, let's look at the rule of evidence and whatever, but at a certain point, this is how you tear apart this mobile app to get fingerprints. It takes somebody in the field, and what I really look for when I hire is somebody who has troubleshooting and critical thinking. Everything else, I can train them, I can teach them, but do they have the ability to solve problems? And as an educator, I don't know how to inspire that in somebody to say, let me teach you how to look at something when something breaks, and how to go through a set of troubleshooting steps to figure it out.
That's great. John, last question before I turn it over is, when we met a year ago, we had described sort of the unique capabilities that Reduxio brought to the table, right? And again, if the NSA and the CIA and a lot of other large organizations can be compromised, and with a limited number of great endpoint solutions, the operating mental model is you're going to be compromised eventually. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Can you talk a little bit about your perception of Reduxio's backdating capability and TimeOS and how it allows organizations to recover from an attack?
Well, I mean, if you talk kind of like the conventional model of recovery, right? Okay, we're going to go to backup tapes, we're going to restore it, and that takes time. Backup tapes degrade. It is not a very rapid process. And like I said, I made reference to it, right? You can invest money in prevention, right? And you could do the math, and you could do a cost-benefit analysis on that. But if you could sit there and get recovery to, all right, this machine got infected with ransomware in this directory or file share, push a button, and in seconds it's recovered, then it becomes pointless to even try to measure the impact, right? Somebody feels sheepish, they get the learning experience, but the business is not disrupted. So you're taking a cost of an event from $1 million to effectively, it costs more to try to measure the impact than the actual impact. And that will have, like I said, mathematically, right? This is a math problem. Why is ransom demanding $1 million ransoms or $1,000 ransoms? Is because the impact they cause is much higher than that. If you bring that impact way low, then people are just going to stop launching these attacks, because organized crime, more than anybody else, understands return on investment, right? They are purely numbers driven, and if attacks didn't work, they wouldn't be launching them.
Yeah, that's great, John. Listen, I can't thank you enough for the time. And for members of our audience, John will be around for the Q&A, so if you do have questions, please do send them to us through the platform, okay? All right, John, thank you. And I'm going to now bring on Dale Warren from LineMaster. Dale, systems analyst for LineMaster Switch Corporation based in Connecticut. Dale, welcome, and thanks for taking time to join us today.
Thanks, Mike.
So, Dale, while we have our chat, we're going to have on the screen a slide that'll just describe sort of at a very synopsis level a little bit about what you do, some of the challenges, and the Reduxio solution. But I'd love to just start off by sharing with our audience a little bit about LineMaster's business. What it is what's the value that you guys bring to the world?
Sure. So LineMaster was founded in 1952, privately held company, light manufacturing, ISO 13485 certified. We're located in Woodstock, Connecticut, with about 160 employees. We manufacture medical and industrial foot controls, and we offer about 550 standard catalog items and numerous turnkey and custom solutions.
Great. And you're a global business, so you've got customers around the world.
Absolutely.
So, how about the IT infrastructure required to support this business? Can you describe it a bit?
Sure. So we have multiple locations, 2 locations. We're using Brocade switch stack with 10 gig copper and fiber connections. Currently 3 physical servers, then a blade chassis supporting an 8-node cluster that hosts about 40 virtual servers and 75 virtual desktops. We are in the process of upgrading that to discrete servers. We also have, okay. So we have about 30 physical computers, and we just installed the Reduxio HX550 TimeOS storage solution to basically move off our standard NAS and SAN devices.
Okay, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but no,
Sure.
That's very helpful. So very much like John spoke about, the data protection threat is significant and increasing. How do you think about the challenges, and what have you done to prepare for these challenges?
Sure. So we use all the typical solutions to prevent a malware, ransomware, virus infection from hardware to software and user training. In addition to that, we have traditional backup strategies, snapshots, which with the Reduxio TimeOS will be going to be a game changer, and that's about it.
Can you say, so why will Reduxio be a game changer, Dale? What is it about Reduxio that you think will allow you to do things that differently?
The recovery time. Just in our development environment where we duplicate our production environment, or basically restoring it, would have taken 4 hours. With the Reduxio, it's down to less than a minute.
That's something that you've experienced directly yourself.
Correct.
Okay. So in terms of what was missing when you brought on Reduxio? What was missing from your IT infrastructure? What gap were you looking to fill, or what process improvement were you looking to realize when you decided to bring Reduxio in?
Well, there were several gaps, I guess, or lack in our storage. There was the capacity, the recovery time. Those are probably the 2 major ones.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Please, Dale, please, go ahead.
So with our development infrastructure and testing environments, like I said, it was a 4-hour process to duplicate the data. Reduxio has changed that, reducing it to about a minute, allowing us to use actual current data to test with. It's been an incredible change.
Okay, so as we look at the the 1-slide case study that's on the screen, right? One of the challenges that you folks have shared is that the difficulty of managing volumes and LUNs and data stores took too much time. So how does Reduxio help you with that?
Well, it's reduced our management costs dramatically. We're no longer really managing dedupe schedules. That's done inline automatically. The tiering of storage is automatic. Again, cloning was reduced dramatically.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Any other significant benefits that you realized that you can share with our listeners?
Well, actually, yesterday we were debugging a problem in our production environment, and we cloned that environment, spun it up, tried to reproduce the problem from data an hour earlier. Couldn't reproduce it. We spun back and went 30 seconds prior to the event, and were able to read the problem and log it. So troubleshooting and debugging, another great reason to have.
That's great. So you had enough granularity to really isolate the problem at the time of inception and go back and mitigate. That's great. And Dale, just looking toward the future, what's next for MindMaster's IT infrastructure? Where do you go from here?
Well, we're in the process of doing a complete compute upgrade. And a VMware upgrade to 6.5. We are pending on a Reduxio TimeOS upgrade to 3. And we are planning on reusing our old storage as a Reduxio target. Okay,
that's great. Excellent. All right. Well, Dale, anything else you want to add before I turn this over to Cedric?
Sure. So we wanted to mention that the post-install support from Reduxio was incredibly detailed and made the whole installation and transfer of data almost seamless. We were up and running in a few hours and moving data immediately. So we'd like to thank Aaron and Dimitri for that.
Yep, and I'll echo that, and it's certainly gratifying to hear that, and we take pride in that. So thank you, Dale. All right, so now I'm going to turn over the program to Cedric. Cedric is with Fivesky, and again, he is a cloud adoption specialist, and Fivesky is a global IT professional services firm with a specialization in cybersecurity. So Cedric, please.
Well, thank you, Mike. And I really appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to share some of our customer viewpoints on the pros and cons of data protection in the cloud today. So over at Fivesky, Mike, our customers, we range from SMB to enterprise organizations. And regardless of size, we found that typically their greatest asset is their data. And as their data grows in volume, you know, our customers are increasingly turning to the cloud to meet the data storage needs, the management needs for both backup and DR. And, you know, when we ask our customers why, you know, why the shift of going from on-prem to the cloud or a hybrid of both, you know, they're just telling us that cloud services for data protection, it offers unprecedented levels of flexibility and scalability. You know, it saves time, it saves costs on hardware, software, maintenance, support, and just those other ancillary costs related to, you know, on-prem solutions. But, you know, by having a service cloud option, you know, our customers are indicating that they can quickly implement a data protection plan very fast nowadays. And by implementing those plans quickly, they can now manage and protect data assets as that volume grows as well. And most importantly, they can manage these views from a single pane. And that's what our customers are really liking with the new technologies that are out now, where they just have one view to manage their replication, their deduplication, and things like that. And I believe, you know, Dale had mentioned that earlier in his conversation as well. You know, besides just using the cloud as a simple backup target, our customers are now rolling out full disaster recovery plans within the service provider. And, you know, this is due to those assets are already off-prem, and with the protection of applications and data, if something were to go awry on-prem, we can now spin up those VMs and bring back those data assets quickly and it's almost like a no recovery time as well, and that's what our customers are looking for. And finally, our customers like the fact that these service providers are using state-of-the-art technology. It includes encryption, deduplication, replication, a lot of things that we talked about earlier, and John had mentioned as well. Single management interfaces and specific application protection as well. These technologies, they're offering our customers the ability to instantly recover data, and that seems to be the theme nowadays. How quickly can we recover that data, and how fast can we do it? And also making that data available from any location and any device in a protected way. Our customers, have indicated that sending data to the cloud, it also presents a few challenges, not a lot of challenges. And data it must be easily accessible, that they're telling us. And due to its nature, data protection in the cloud, it relies on an internet connection and bandwidth availability. And our customers are telling us if bandwidth is not available or highly available, first time seeding, first time recovering of that data, it could be a lengthy, time-consuming process. And therefore, it could prohibit some SLAs and may not meet your business RTOs as well. So, our customers are telling us that make sure that you have adequate bandwidth for both recovery and for backup. Also, some of our customers at Fivesky, they're in a heavily regulated industry, such as healthcare, financial services, and some are also publicly traded companies. And they often have implications of where they can store data as well. And so it's important to note for them, if they're storing data with a service provider outside of the country, does that break any protection laws as well? So as we begin to work more and more with our customers, we're really educating them and working with them on where that data is residing as well. And then finally, vendor lock-in. Our customers are telling us that's a challenge as well. They're not. We're understanding with them that they're not signing long-term contracts now. They don't want to be locked into that vendor. And so, in often cases, we do have some customers that are leveraging multiple service providers for both backup and restore, along with their on-prem solution as well. So just overall, again, I just want to take a few minutes just to give you the pros and cons of what we're hearing in the industry today. But overall, the advantages and disadvantages of data protection in the cloud for our customers, it's really dependent upon their environment and the key requirements that they have for backup and VR. The cloud, it gives our customers the opportunity to move away from heavy hardware solutions, and I know John and Dale had mentioned that earlier. CapEx, it helps with CapEx purchases and enables them to automate more processes. It saves time, it saves money as well. And the really nice thing that our customers are telling us as well is when more or less capacity is needed or resources, the cloud can scale up and down to meet their business needs without service interruption, and that's a key point for us as well. Again, when we're working with our customers in architecting a solution for them to go to the cloud to protect data and their applications, we really want them to understand in detail, what data they have, the life cycle of that data, and what legislation and regulations they need to adhere to for protecting their data.
Great. Thank you, Cedric. And Cedric, I know that Fivesky and Reduxio are working together within a number of organizations, working to put together sort of a solution for them as they move to the cloud and they think about protecting data. Can you talk a bit about where the Reduxio HX550 TimeOS and system fits into your overall view of cloud adoption and cybersecurity for the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was mentioned a little bit earlier, but I'll just kind of reiterate some of the things Dale had said. That single management interface is important to our customers. It fits in really well there. The deduplication and replication, having the ability to restore quickly as well with the TimeOS and those feature sets. It's really playing a very nice and painting a very nice picture for our customers and giving them that overall solution that they require. And and with the technology that Reduxio has, our customers are really loving it as well.
That's great. Thank you, Cedric. All right. So I think we've concluded now the formal part of the webinar presentation, and we're now moving toward question and answer. We've got a handful of minutes for questions, but I think if we can take a handful of questions now, get you folks done by 5 of the hour, and then we'll take the rest of the questions and we'll respond back to people via email. So what questions do we have from our audience today? Okay. So this is a question for John Bambenek. John, can you provide some guidance to our listeners on endpoint security versus a backup strategy?
So I guess, where to invest, and the answer is always both, right? Because at the end of the day, one, accidents happen, you'll need to restore, an endpoint can't protect you. But really, it's tackling 2 different sides of a math problem. One is, the likelihood of your impact, which is what endpoints can do. They can prevent and stop the impact, or, there's an event that happens and you need to recover from it. And the chief problem with endpoint solutions is that the bad guys can buy them so that they know they can get past them eventually in some subset of circumstances because they can test their attacks. So, I don't know if I've got a percentage breakdown. Certainly for compliance reasons, you're going to need some endpoint tool, right? But what I find most exciting, the most innovation and financial impact for ROI is if you really can measure your cost of recovery and reducing that, say 90%, right? You're going to still have to have somebody recover it, but it's going to be painless. So I think there's some real encouraging benefits there.
Okay. Thank you, John. Next question, I think, is for Dale. Yeah. Yeah. All right, just here we go. So Dale, question for you is about, can you talk, what do you specifically mean about using your old storage system as a Reduxio target? If you could just explain that for our listeners, please.
Right, so we would use Reduxio, which would target our older storage for replication of the data to another building on our campus.
Okay. Okay. Another question? I'm just waiting for the question to post on the system. Okay, this is another question for Dale. Dale, what other storage arrays did you either consider or, test prior to committing to Reduxio?
Right. I don't have that list in front of me, but there were probably 8 industry leaders. TinTree was one of them. Some HP solutions. Like I said, I don't have that list in front of me to tell you off the top of my head.
But fairly exhaustive analysis that was done.
Absolutely.
One more? All right. All right, so I think this will be the last question we'll take. And again, it's being directed at Dale. Can you please share a little bit more detail on the development environment that's now being provisioned in minutes instead of days? Or minutes instead of hours, excuse me. Okay. What's the development environment look like specifically?
Sure. So I don't work in that environment on a day-to-day basis. Another team member does. But it's a SQL-based database for an ERP system we're running. And it took, with the old storage units, like I said, 4 hours to restore.
Yes.
And now we're down to a minute with the Reduxio.
Okay. All right. So, Dale, thank you. John, thank you for taking the questions. And again, as promised, we're going to wrap up a few minutes early, but I did want to share with you our upcoming VMUG webinar series. We're very proud to be affiliated with VMUG. The evaluations from prior audiences have been very, very high, I think largely because we're not here to sell, we're here to educate. And so we'll take a very similar approach over the next 3 months. On the 17th of October, we're going to focus specifically on virtual desktop infrastructure, and the theme is, weathering the storm, how to handle VDI boot storms with ease. We'll have Stuart Minimum from SiliconANGLE and theCUBE, who is a renowned virtualization expert and VMware expert, will join us on that call early November. We'll do something on simplifying your IT infrastructure, automating your storage using the REST application programming interface. And then to finish up this 4-part series on the 6th of December, we'll move back into the world that we just finished our last question on, a day in the life of the development operations and inside view into today's DevOps shops. So I want to thank VMUG for giving us the opportunity to spend time with your worldwide, world-class community, and I'm now going to turn this back over to Annie.
Great. Thank you, Mike and team, for taking